Hello everybody, this is Johns Hopkins with Baltimore Heritage, and we're back with another of our 5-Minute Histories videos. And today I'm on North Monroe Street, just around the corner from Frederick Douglass High School, on Damen Mall, if you know where those are. And it doesn't take long looking at the building behind me to realize what was going on there. It of course was a dairy. In fact, it was Cloverland Farms Dairy. Built that building in 1928 with the milk bottle, and still going strong in Baltimore today. I bet many of you have Cloverland milk in your refrigerator right now, or half and half. I bet many of you remember the 1960s jingle that Cloverland had, "If you don't own a cow, call Cloverland now," featuring a comic puppet made by none other than Jim Henson. And I bet a little earlier, some of you may remember a convenience store, a milk market, a milk store called Royal Farms when it got its start. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. We are going to talk about those great Baltimore stories, but we're also going to talk a little bit about how this milk bottle building fits into a national movement of using architecture to promote your brand. And let's start with that. People, of course, have been promoting their brands for millennia. By 1100 BC, there was a Chinese candy company that had hired flute players to wander the streets promoting its own brand of candy. In the modern era, most people credit an English company called Tate & Lyle for creating the first brand-specific packaging. Their signature gold and green cans of something called Lyle's Golden Syrup can still be found today in British tea shops and, alas, on Amazon, where you can find everything. But using a building as part of your advertising really didn't get started until the age of the automobile. Before the car, people used to walk around cities and towns, and they pretty much knew what was going on in each of the buildings they passed. But with the advent of the car, people were zipping around, and they were zipping around quickly in parts of town that they might not be familiar with. Now, if you owned a big building like a brewery, everybody could see it and know what was going on. But if you owned a smaller building, you wanted to capture the attention of some of those car zippers, and you could do it by building part of your product or an icon of your product into the building itself. That's sometimes called programmatic architecture or mimetic architecture. Milk bottles were not the only ones to show up in this era, but they were some of the first. Now, we couldn't find the definitive first milk bottle building in the country, but we know in 1913, the Richmond Dairy in Richmond, Virginia, built not one, but 3 milk bottles into the corners of its facility. And right about that same time, a company called the Polk Sanitary Milk Company in Indianapolis also built a giant milk bottle in its manufacturing plant. By the 1920s and 30s, you could find milk bottle buildings in Spokane, Washington, New Bedford, Massachusetts, and Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. In addition to just corners of buildings, you could find freestanding milk bottles, so the entire building was a milk bottle, selling ice cream and pies in Whately, Massachusetts, and Corpus Christi, Texas. They were literally all over the country. By the early 1930s, things had gone international, and you had milk bottle buildings in places like Ontario and Montreal. So in 1928, when Cloverland built this new facility here on Monroe Street, building into it a giant milk bottle, they were squarely part of the milk bottle craze. Cloverland Farms was started in about 1919 by a gentleman named Maynard Kemp and his brothers. They had a farm in Frederick with Guernsey cows, and they brought their rich milk to homes in Baltimore. For many years, they were duking it out with their chief rival, the Green Spring Dairy, to see who could gain preeminence in the Baltimore and Washington milk market. In 1995, however, they merged, giving us today what's called the Cloverland Green Spring Dairy. Along the way, however, a lot of milk technology changed, including the technologies that allowed milk to be kept longer, including in home refrigerators. And so by the 1950s and 1960s, home milk deliveries were beginning to lag a little bit. But as they say, when one door closes, another one opens. At least that's what the folks at Cloverland thought. And they came up with this concept called a milk store. They would sell milk from refrigerators in the store directly to consumers stores, but not going door to door. By about the 1950s, they had also merged with another local rival called the Royal Dunlogan Dairy, and they decided to take this milk store concept even further and turn it into a full-on convenience store. When it was time to come up with the name, they chose one word from each company. They chose Royal from Royal Dunlogan, and then they chose Farms from Cloverland Farms, giving us today Royal Farms, the fried chicken mecca that we all know. Also in that era, as sort of home sales were lagging and they were trying to gin up sales for their new milk stores and convenience stores, they came up with a series of advertising, and at least one of the advertisements featured what was called the Cloverland cow. It was developed by this young puppeteer, Jim Henson, and his wife, Jane Nebel. They had created these comic puppets that they called Muppets for a TV show called Sam and Friends in the 1950s in Washington, D.C. The show was relatively short-lived, but the puppets were not. They, of course, went on to great fame. But along the way, Henson and his wife also did other things with their puppets, including help Cloverland advertise its milk. I am going to wrap up by saying the building behind me is no longer a Cloverland dairy building. It's a Head Start facility and child center. But Cloverland is still squarely in Baltimore City. If you're ever on Lock Raven Boulevard over near Baltimore City College, and you look over, you will see some great, enormous white storage tanks shooting up into the sky, and those are storing milk from Cloverland's milk processing facility there. They are sadly not shaped like milk bottles, but I think once you know what they are and you zip past in your car, they serve the same purpose. They clearly show that this is a milk producing facility. All right, thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.